The sound of my phone buzzing at 6:14 a.m. wasn't surprising. It rarely was. My father had this uncanny ability to treat my mornings like they belonged to him. A message would arrive before the coffee even brewed, a demand tucked inside politeness. Need you to transfer 200 by noon. Bank's closed. You're faster. No, please. No, thank you. Just the quiet assumption that I'd take care of it, like always. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering above the reply button, feeling that familiar tightening in my chest. The kind that wasn't quite anger, but wasn't peace either. In the kitchen, the coffee maker hissed, releasing that burnt, bitter smell that always reminded me of my childhood home. Of mornings where my parents fought softly so the neighbors wouldn't hear, where my mother pretended everything was fine and my father left for work without a glance at any of us. I had learned early that silence was the only way to survive in a family that didn't listen. My wife, Leah, stirred awake on the couch. She'd fallen asleep there again after putting Caleb to bed. We'd both been working late me at the warehouse, her on night shifts at the clinic, and it showed in the way her hair was pinned up messily, her voice still heavy with sleep. "Another message?" she asked without opening her eyes. "Yeah," I said. "Dad." She sighed, not even surprised. "You don't have to do it, you know." "I know," I said, but I didn't mean it. Because I would. I always did. Flashback. The first rescue. When I was 15, I found my dad in the garage with a bottle of whiskey and a stack of overdue bills. He'd lost his job that month and hadn't told anyone. My mother had been making dinners out of canned soup and apologies. Aaron, my younger brother by 3 years, was still too young to understand. I remember the night I took the phone, called the bank, pretended to be my father, and negotiated for an extension. My hands were shaking, but I did it. The next morning, he patted my shoulder, not with pride, but relief. "You're a good man," he said. "Dependable. Always were." And I carried that word like a medal. By the time I was 25, dependable had turned into available. My parents didn't just rely on me, they consumed me. I was the emergency contact, the unpaid therapist, the weekend mover, the quiet son who always showed up. Aaron, on the other hand, was the prodigal one. The dreamer, the screw-up, the one who could vanish for 6 months and still be welcomed home with roast chicken and praise. It wasn't that I resented him. Not exactly. It's just that when you spend your whole life cleaning up after someone else's chaos, you forget what your own life is supposed to look like. Caleb padded into the kitchen then, his little feet thumping softly on the tile. "Morning, Dad," he mumbled, still half asleep, his hair a wild mess of brown curls. "Morning, buddy." I smiled, watching him climb onto a chair like it was Everest. "Pancakes or cereal?" "Cereal," he said, rubbing his eyes. "The one with the stars." I poured it for him, listening to the crunch and slurp. Simple, small sounds of peace. The kind you learn to treasure when you've spent years surrounded by shouting. He looked up suddenly, spoon paused midair. "Are we going to Grandma's for Christmas?" My hand froze on the coffee mug. I hadn't told him yet. "Yeah," I said slowly. "Yeah, we are." "Will Uncle Aaron be there?" "Probably." "And Grandpa?" "Yep." He grinned, then frowned. "Will they like my gift?" I smiled, but something behind my ribs felt like it cracked. "They'll love it," I said, because kids should believe in that. They should believe family means warmth, not wounds. That night, Leah and I lay in bed, lights off, silence thick between us. "You don't have to go," she whispered. "We could stay home this year, just us." "I can't," I said automatically. They'd take it wrong." She turned to face me, her voice calm but sharp. "Evan, they already take everything wrong." I wanted to argue, to defend them, but I couldn't. Because deep down, I knew she was right. I'd spent 34 years trying to earn love that only existed when I was useful, when I was the problem solver. The peacemaker. The provider. Never just the son. Memory. The unsaid. Apology. 3 years ago, Aaron borrowed $1,500 from me for rent. A week later, I found out he'd used it for a trip to Vegas. When I confronted him, he laughed. "You're better with money," he said. "You'll make it back." I waited for him to apologize. He never did. Instead, my parents called me dramatic. "Don't hold grudges," my mother said. "He's family." And like a fool, I forgave him. Not because he asked me to, but because I didn't know how not to. Back in the present, the snow had started falling outside. Caleb's laughter echoed from the living room where he was stacking Legos. Leah sat at the table across from me, sipping tea, studying me with that quiet understanding that comes from loving someone's damage for too long. "You're not them," she said softly. I looked up. "What?" "Your parents. You're not them. You're building something different. You just don't see it yet." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. But it's hard to feel free when your entire life has been built around obligation. The phone buzzed again. Another message from Dad. "Don't forget about the rent." I stared at it. Then I turned it over, face down. The first act of rebellion so small it almost didn't count. But maybe it did. That night, as I tucked Caleb into bed, he reached out, holding my wrist. "Dad?" "Yeah, bud?" He looked up, serious now. "When I'm big, do I have to take care of you too?" The question hit harder than any slap could have. My throat tightened. "What do you mean?" He shrugged. "Like how you take care of Grandpa all the time." I swallowed hard. "No," I said softly. "When you're big, I'll take care of me. You just live your life, okay?" He nodded, satisfied, curling up with his stuffed fox. And in that moment, I realized, maybe that's how it starts. Not with fireworks, not with shouting, but with a promise whispered in the dark. The drive to my parents' house felt longer than usual, even though it was only 40 minutes. The snow was falling heavy that morning. Thick flakes that clung to the windshield like ash. Caleb sat in the back seat, humming a carol softly, his mittened hands clutching the small, carefully wrapped box on his lap. The Lego set he'd bought for my dad. A gift from a boy who believed giving meant love would follow. Leah rode beside me, quiet. Her hand rested on the window, tracing invisible lines through the fogged glass. "You don't have to do this," she said finally, her voice almost drowned out by the hum of the tires. "I know," I answered, because I did know. But knowing something doesn't make it easier to walk away from the ghosts you grew up with. When we pulled up, the house looked the same as always. The sagging porch, the half-dead wreath, the glowing plastic Santa that had been in the family since I was 10. My mother stood at the door before I even killed the engine, waving eagerly, her smile too wide to be genuine. I tried to ignore the tightening in my chest. Inside, everything smelled of cinnamon and bleach, my mother's signature combination, like she was trying to scrub away the past but still make it festive. The old CD was playing, skipping every few seconds. "Hark the herald, herald, herald," until my father thumped the stereo with his fist. "Still works fine," he muttered. "No need for a new one." Of course not. Aaron's car was already in the driveway, gleaming like a statement. He was leaning back on the couch, a beer in hand, his wife scrolling through her phone, and their son, Jacob, sitting cross-legged on the floor surrounded by wrapping paper and toys. Mom swooped in the moment we entered. "There's my Caleb," she said, arms wide, but her eyes flicked past him just a second too quickly, landing on Jacob instead. "Oh, look at you, Jacob. You're getting so big." Caleb smiled politely, standing there holding his little box like an offering nobody wanted. Leah bent down, whispering something to him, smoothing his hair. I caught her eyes, that warning glimmer that said, "Be careful, Evan. Don't let them make you small again." Dinner was late, as always. Mom darted around the kitchen in her apron like a woman possessed, muttering about timing and gravy and how Aaron's boy eats like a champion, such a healthy appetite. Every compliment aimed at him was a shadow falling on my son. Caleb helped set the table, his small fingers careful with each fork, each plate. He took it seriously, like it was sacred. When he finished, there were 8 settings, 8 plates, 8 chairs, and 1 faint cranberry stain on the tablecloth in front of his seat. No plate, no fork, just the ghost of a meal from the year before. I stared at it, something hollow expanding inside my chest. "Mom," I said quietly, "Caleb needs a place setting." She didn't turn around. "There's not enough, sweetheart. It's fine. He can share with you." "Share," I repeated, my voice cracking slightly. "You made enough for Jacob to have seconds." Aaron snorted into his beer. "Let it go, man. It's just a plate." Leah froze beside me, her face pale. Caleb looked up, confusion flickering in his eyes. "But I said sorry last time," he whispered, voice trembling. "I won't spill again." My mother's knife scraped against the carving board. "Oh, Caleb, don't be dramatic," she said too brightly. "You're fine." The table went silent. The Christmas lights flickered, one bulb shorting out with a soft pop. For a second, it was just the hum of the old refrigerator, the faint skipping of that damn CD. And something inside me broke. Not loud, not violent. Just quietly, the way a branch snaps deep inside a forest where nobody hears it. I stood up, slowly. Leah's hand brushed mine under the table. A silent, "Are you sure?" I was. "Come on, Caleb," I said, my voice steady. "We're going home." The room stilled. My father looked up from his plate, brow furrowed. "What's this now? You're leaving before dinner?" "Yeah," I said. "Before dinner. Before the pretending starts." Aaron chuckled, low and mocking. "Oh, come on, man, you're overreacting. It's Christmas." I turned to him, smiling in that calm, terrifying way only exhaustion can create. "Then enjoy it." Leah stood too, gathering her coat. Caleb hesitated for just a second, his eyes darting from me to my mother, searching, maybe, for one person to tell him he was allowed to belong. Nobody did. So he walked toward me, his small fingers slipping into mine. We left the gifts under the tree. Nobody stopped us. Nobody even called after us. Outside, the air was knife cold. The snow had stopped, leaving everything too still, too clean. I buckled Caleb into his seat, watching the reflection of the Christmas lights shimmer across the window. He didn't cry. He didn't ask why. He just held that unopened Lego box against his chest, clutching it like a secret. Leah slid into the passenger seat, her breath fogging the window. "You did the right thing," she said quietly. "I don't feel like it." "You will." We drove home in silence. The roads were empty, save for the occasional set of headlights passing in the opposite direction. Somewhere, people were singing, laughing, unwrapping presents. And I was wondering how it had taken me 34 years to realize that leaving wasn't cruel. Staying was. At home, I tucked Caleb into bed. He was still holding the box. "You can open it," I said softly. He shook his head. "It's for Grandpa." I swallowed hard, brushing the hair from his forehead. "Grandpa doesn't need it, buddy. You keep it." He stared at it for a long time, then whispered, "Did I do something bad?" God, that sentence. I sat beside him, pressing my forehead to his. "No," I said. "You did everything right. You always do." His eyes fluttered shut. Within minutes, he was asleep, his hand curled protectively around the toy he'd never get to give. At 9:47 p.m., my phone buzzed. A message from Dad. "Rent due tomorrow." That was it. No greeting, no question. Just the assumption that I would obey. I stared at it for a long time. Leah was sitting beside me on the couch, the TV flickering blue light across her face. She didn't say anything, but I could feel her watching me. I opened the family group chat, the one filled with decades of false warmth and shallow check-ins. Then I posted a photo. The table. 8 plates. 1 empty spot. And Caleb sitting there, small and quiet, his hands folded neatly in front of the stain. I wrote one sentence beneath it. "You didn't set a place for my son. That's all anyone needs to know." And I hit send. The chat exploded within seconds. Mom sending crying face emojis and long paragraphs about misunderstandings. Aaron defending himself, claiming Caleb overreacted. Dad replying with a single line, "Don't make a scene." But for once, I didn't reply, didn't explain, didn't beg them to understand. I just typed one word. No. And then I turned off my phone. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was clean. It was peace. Leah leaned her head on my shoulder, whispering, "You finally did it." Did what? Stopped asking to be loved. That night, I dreamed of Caleb, older, taller, sitting at a table surrounded by laughter and warmth, every plate full, every chair filled. And in that dream, I wasn't tired anymore. The morning after Christmas was so quiet it felt unnatural. The kind of silence that makes you think something's wrong, like the world's holding its breath, waiting to see what you'll do next. Leah was still asleep. Caleb was sprawled across his bed, his arm hanging over the edge, clutching that Lego box. I stood in the kitchen with a mug of coffee gone cold, staring at my phone sitting face down on the counter. I hadn't checked it since last night. When I finally did, it was worse than I expected. 67 new messages. The family group chat looked like a war zone. Paragraphs, missed calls, guilt grenades dressed as apologies. "Mom, you embarrassed us, Evan. We always try so hard and this is how you repay us?" Aaron, "Bro, what the hell? You know how bad that looked?" Dad, "We need to talk. Be a man and face your family." That last one stuck to me like a stain. Be a man. The words I'd been hearing since I was 12. Every time I cried, every time I hesitated, every time I asked for help. But I wasn't 12 anymore. And being a man didn't mean swallowing the things that broke you. The knock came just before noon. 3 sharp raps. The kind that didn't ask permission. I didn't even have to look through the window. I knew it was him. My father stood on the porch in his good coat, the one he wore to church and funerals. The fabric was pressed, the collar stiff. Like he thought if he looked respectable enough, everything he said would carry more weight. He didn't waste time. "You made your mother cry," he said as soon as I opened the door. No greeting. No Merry Christmas. I stepped aside. "Come in." He shook his head. "Not staying long." Of course not. For a moment we just stood there in the cold air between us. Him on the porch, me in the doorway. Like 2 men at opposite ends of a bridge neither of us wanted to cross. Finally, he said, "You didn't have to make a scene. That video, those messages. You could have called me." I took a slow breath. "I tried calling for years, Dad. You just never picked up." His jaw tightened. "You always take things too far. And you always pretend you don't see them." Something flickered in his eyes then. Not guilt, not even anger. Just weariness. He sighed, rubbed his forehead. "Your mother's sick about this. She says Caleb misunderstood." "Did he?" I cut in, because I saw the table. I saw his face. He looked away. "It was one night." "No," I said, "it's a lifetime." He didn't answer. The wind picked up, tossing snow across the porch steps like ash. For a second, I thought he might turn and leave. Then he said it, the line he'd always come back to, the one that made my stomach twist. "Be a man, help us out. Rent's due tomorrow." The old transaction, emotion traded for obligation. I laughed softly, shaking my head. "You really came here for money." His eyes snapped to mine, hard. "You owe this family, Evan. Don't forget who raised you." "I haven't," I said. "I remember every bit of it." For a heartbeat, we just stared at each other. And then something shifted in me. That deep, heavy guilt I'd carried since childhood finally loosened its grip. "I am a man," I said quietly. "But I'm Caleb's father first." He blinked, as if the words didn't compute. Then his mouth opened, maybe to argue, maybe to say something cruel. But nothing came out. He just turned, stepped off the porch, and walked down the icy path to his car. He didn't look back. The door clicked shut behind him, and the silence that followed wasn't the kind that suffocates. It was clean, still, peaceful. Leah appeared in the hallway, still in her robe, her eyes searching my face. "Was that your dad?" "Yeah." "How'd it go?" I smiled faintly. "He left." She nodded slowly, walked over, and wrapped her arms around me. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the urge to shrink. That night, after Caleb went to bed, Leah and I sat on the couch surrounded by the soft buzz of the TV. The house smelled like cocoa and pine. She leaned her head against my shoulder. "What now?" she asked. I looked toward Caleb's room, the faint crack of light under his door. "Now," I said, "we build something that lasts." Later, when I checked my phone again, there was one last message from my mother. "I wish you'd come back, honey. Things were always better when you were around." I stared at it for a long time before typing a reply. That's because I was the one holding everything up. And I didn't send it. Some words are meant to be said only in your own head, as proof that you finally understand them. Outside, the snow started falling again. Slow, quiet, steady. The world, it seemed, had decided to cover the past in white. The first week after Christmas felt like waking up in a house that wasn't haunted anymore, but still creaked from memory. The phone stopped buzzing after 3 days. That should have felt like peace. But instead, it was the kind of quiet that makes you second-guess everything. Leah noticed it first. The way I'd pause before opening my messages. The way I'd scroll through old photos. The ones I should have deleted. Birthdays, summer barbecues, Caleb laughing in my father's lap before I learned what that smile cost us. "Are you sure you're okay?" she asked one night, folding laundry on the couch. I nodded automatically. "Yeah, I'm just decompressing." But the truth was, I kept hearing their voices even when the phone didn't ring. My father's command. My mother's apology that always came with an invoice. Aaron's easy laugh, the sound of someone who's never had to question his place at the table. By mid-January, the snow had crusted over into something sharp and gray. The world looked like it was made of glass. Fragile, but unbreakable. That's how I felt too. Whole on the surface. Splintered underneath. Work became my refuge. The office buzzed with its own kind of chaos. Deadlines, coffee stains, the hum of computers that never slept. It was easier to lose myself in tasks that didn't ask how I was feeling. Until the email came. Subject line, Family Matters. It was from Aaron. "Hey bro, I know things got heated. Mom's been real upset. She's telling everyone Caleb's sensitive. You know how kids are. Anyway, we're doing a family dinner next week. Be the bigger man and come. Bring Caleb if you want. She promised to set an extra plate this time." That last sentence, that winking face, it wasn't just mockery. It was dismissal, an attempt to rewrite the entire event as some harmless misunderstanding, like it hadn't broken something fundamental. I stared at the email for a long time before forwarding it to Leah with one line. "They still don't get it." She didn't reply right away. But when she did, it was only 2 words. "Then stop trying." That night, Caleb came into our room clutching his stuffed fox. His hair stuck out in every direction, his eyes bleary but serious. "Dad?" he whispered. "Yeah, buddy?" He hesitated. "Grandma doesn't like me, does she?" My throat closed up. Of all the things I'd prepared to explain to him, bullies, loss, fear, I wasn't ready for that one. I sat up, pulled him closer. "Hey, look at me." He did, eyes wide, searching for truth. "It's not that she doesn't like you," I said slowly. "It's that she doesn't understand how amazing you are yet." "Will she ever?" The question hit harder than it should have. I wanted to lie, to say yes, to promise him a world that wasn't so cruel in the quiet ways. But I couldn't. "I don't know," I said honestly. "But that's not your job to fix, okay?" He nodded, small and brave, then whispered, "I like our family better." That one sentence, so simple, so pure, broke something open in me that all my father's words never could. 2 days later, the video surfaced online. A friend from my old neighborhood sent it with a message. "This you?" It was my mother, filmed at a local church potluck, voice trembling, eyes wet. She was telling her version of the story. "He's always been dramatic," she said, hand over her heart. "We love little Caleb, but he's different. You know how adopted kids can be? Sensitive." Evan overreacted. He embarrassed the whole family online. We're praying for him. The room around her nodded sympathetically, passing her tissues. Someone even hugged her. I didn't finish watching. I couldn't. My stomach twisted in that familiar way. The kind that comes when you realize the people who hurt you will always find an audience before they find remorse. I closed the laptop, leaned back in the chair, and whispered to no one. "They'll never stop, will they?" Leah appeared in the doorway, her voice quiet but steady. "Then we don't stop either." That night, I deleted their numbers. Not out of anger, out of necessity. You can't rebuild if you keep leaving the back door unlocked. Caleb slept soundly. Leah traced circles on my hand until my breathing slowed. And for the first time in a long time, I dreamed of something other than empty tables. I dreamed of building a new one. From scratch. No ghosts invited. The day I found the letter, it was raining the way it only rains in January. Thin, cold, and endless, like the sky itself was tired of pretending to start over. Leah had asked me to grab an old box from the attic, Christmas decorations we forgot to pack away. But when I pulled the box open, beneath the tangle of lights and fake snow garland, I saw it. A yellowed envelope, edges frayed, handwriting that made my breath catch. It was my grandfather's. A man I barely remembered. A quiet shadow in the background of old photos, always sitting apart from the others, hands folded like he was keeping secrets from himself. The front of the envelope said, "To my son, for when he becomes me." That line alone sent a shiver down my spine, because my father had become him, and I was terrified I'd become both. I didn't open it right away. I sat with it for a while, tracing the ridges of the paper, feeling its weight. It was strange. Holding history like that, realizing how heavy silence could be when it travels through generations. Finally, I unfolded the letter. "You'll know when to read this, son. You'll know because the house will be quiet, and someone will be angry at you for reasons you can't explain. It happened to me. It'll happen to you. Maybe by the time your son reads this, someone will have the courage to stop it." I read the words again, slower this time. The handwriting shook. The ink faded. There were coffee rings on the corner of the page, like someone had read it over and over while trying to make sense of their own failings. "You'll tell yourself you're doing right by your family. You'll work too much, drink too much, talk too little. You'll say yes when you mean no because you think love is sacrifice. But son, love that costs your self-respect isn't love. It's debt. And debt has a way of passing down." I stopped reading for a moment. The attic was silent except for the patter of rain against the roof. Somewhere below me, I could hear Caleb humming to himself, a sound so small and innocent it made my chest ache. When I finished the letter, my hands were trembling. It ended like this: "If you find this before you've repeated me, you still have time. If not, tell your boy you're sorry before he learns to flinch when you raise your hand, even to wave. Break it, son. Break it before it breaks him." I sat there for a long time, the words echoing through me like an old hymn. I thought about my father, how he'd never talk about his childhood, how his eyes went blank whenever someone mentioned Grandpa, how he'd been the responsible one, too, long before I ever was. And it hit me. This wasn't new. The way they used guilt to control, the way love was measured in obedience, not warmth. It had been rehearsed, refined, passed down like some family heirloom no one ever wanted but no one dared to throw away. That night, I showed the letter to Leah. She read it twice, lips pressed tight, then set it down gently on the counter like it might break. "Do you believe he meant it?" she asked. "I think he meant to stop it," I said. "He just didn't know how." She looked at me, her eyes soft but sharp, the kind of look that saw through the armor I'd been wearing my whole life. "And do you?" she asked. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I thought about Caleb again, how his laugh still came easy, how he still believed the world could be kind. And I realized that breaking something like this isn't loud. It's quiet. It's 1,000 small choices in moments no one sees. "I'm trying," I finally said. Leah nodded. "That's enough for now." The next morning, Caleb wandered into the kitchen, hair wild, wearing his superhero pajamas. "Dad," he said seriously, "can I help you make breakfast today?" "Sure, buddy," I said, sliding the pan toward him. "What do you want to make?" He grinned. "Pancakes, but this time, can we make extra? For next time we have people over, so everyone gets some." His words stopped me cold, because that's what breaking the cycle really looks like. A child still believing there's enough for everyone, even after learning what it means to be left out. I smiled, blinked back the sting in my eyes, and said, "Yeah, buddy. This time, we'll make sure there's more than enough." That afternoon, I went back to the attic. I found the photo box again. Inside, I tucked my grandfather's letter into a new envelope. On the front, I wrote, "For Caleb, read this only when you think you're starting to become me. And if you do, remember, you have permission to stop." I sealed it and placed it at the bottom of the box. Then I closed the lid. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was running from my family's story. I felt like I was rewriting it. It was a Thursday when the knock came. Sharp, deliberate, the kind that announces not a guest, but a reckoning. I didn't need to look through the peephole to know who it was. No one else in my life knocked like that. It was the same rhythm my father used when I was a kid. 3 short raps, a pause, then one long, heavy thud. The sound of command. Leah was in the living room helping Caleb with his homework. She froze when she heard it, then looked at me quietly. I knew what she was thinking. "Are you going to answer?" I nodded. "Some debts don't disappear just because you stop paying them." He stood there in the doorway, hat in hand, coat still damp from the drizzle outside. His face had aged, deep lines carved around his mouth, the kind that come from scowling more than smiling. But his eyes were the same, that particular kind of cold that could freeze a conversation before it even began. "You gonna let me in?" he said. I hesitated. For a moment, I saw him not as my father, but as the man I'd learned to survive, a walking contradiction of duty and distance. Then I stepped aside. He walked in like he owned the place. It was instinct, I suppose. People like him never learned the difference between being welcome and being allowed. Leah stood up when he entered. "Hi, Mr. Carter," she said carefully. He grunted a greeting, eyes already sweeping over the room, taking stock like he always did. The modest furniture, the framed school photos on the wall, the faint scent of pancakes from breakfast. "You keep it neat," he muttered, half compliment, half inspection. Then his gaze landed on Caleb, who sat quietly at the table, pencil poised above his math workbook. "That him?" The question hung in the air like smoke. I felt Leah stiffen beside me. "His name's Caleb," I said evenly. Dad nodded, expression unreadable. "Didn't think you'd go for adopting. Always figured you'd want your own." Leah stepped forward before I could speak. "He is our own." The room went still. For a moment I thought he might say something cruel, but instead he looked down, just briefly, and muttered, "Didn't mean it like that." But we both knew he did. We sat at the table, the same one Caleb used for homework and Saturday pancakes. Dad's hands were rough, his nails rimmed with grease, even though he'd been retired 5 years now. He used to say a man's hands should always look like he works, even when he doesn't. "So," he began, voice low, "you're not sending the money anymore." "No," I said. "Your mother says she's been behind on bills. Aaron's car's still in the shop, you know that." "I know," I said, "but it's not my problem anymore." His eyes flicked up, sharp. "You think you're better than them now? You forget who raised you?" I exhaled slowly. I didn't forget. I just stopped pretending it didn't hurt. That got him. His jaw tightened, his hands curling into fists on the table. For a second, I thought he'd stand, maybe shout. But he stayed still. Too still. "When you were little," he said quietly, "you used to look at me like I hung the moon. Now you look at me like I broke it." I didn't answer right away, because part of me wanted to say you did. But another part, the part that still remembered the smell of his aftershave and the way he carried me on his shoulders at the fair, couldn't. Instead, I said, "Maybe I just finally saw what it really was." Leah excused herself to the kitchen. Caleb was pretending to read, but his little shoulders were tense, his pencil still. He was listening. I didn't want him to, but maybe he needed to. "Dad," I said, leaning forward, "you taught me to show up, to provide, to keep the roof from leaking, the lights on. I learned that from you, but you also taught me that feelings were weakness, that asking for kindness was begging, and I'm done teaching my son that." He stared at me, long and hard, like he was trying to find the boy he once understood. When he spoke again, his voice had softened, but only slightly. "You think you're fixing things by walking away? You think you're teaching that kid anything but how to give up?" I shook my head. "I'm teaching him how to stay, how to choose himself before he's chosen for. That's not giving up. That's stopping the bleeding." He leaned back in his chair, exhaled through his nose, rubbed a hand over his face. For the first time, he looked tired. Really tired. Like a man who's been carrying too much pride for too long. "I don't get you," he muttered. "Maybe you're right. Maybe I did things wrong. But I did them for family. Everything I had went to this family." I looked at him. Really looked. And for the first time, I saw the boy in him too. The boy my grandfather's letter talked about. The one who learned to say yes when he meant no, because saying no got him silence instead of safety. "I know," I said quietly. "And that's exactly why I can't keep doing it." He stared at me, waiting for me to break. But I didn't. The silence stretched until even the walls seemed to hold their breath. Finally, he pushed back his chair. It scraped against the tile. Harsh, final. He stood, adjusted his hat, and said, "You're your own man then. Just remember, every bridge you burn looks bright until you need to cross back over. He turned and walked to the door, but before he stepped outside, he paused. Without looking back, he said, "He's a good-looking kid. Reminds me of you when you used to smile more." Then he was gone. The door clicked shut. For a long while, I just stood there, staring at the place he'd been. Then Caleb's small voice broke the quiet. "Dad," he said softly, "are you okay?" I turned. He was standing by the table, still clutching his pencil. His eyes, those wide, honest eyes, searched mine for an answer I didn't know how to give. I knelt down in front of him. "Yeah, buddy, I'm okay. Sometimes being okay just looks like finally telling the truth." He nodded solemnly, then leaned forward and hugged me. It was a small thing, his arms barely reaching around my neck, but it felt like a victory centuries in the making. That night, after he went to bed, Leah sat beside me on the couch. "You did good today," she whispered. I didn't feel like it. I felt hollow, drained. But maybe that's how healing starts, not with joy, but with exhaustion. On the table beside us, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You were right. He read your post. He's not talking to anyone, but he'll come around." It was from Aaron, my brother. I stared at it for a long time, then typed 2 words and hit send. "I hope so." Then I turned off my phone, leaned back, and closed my eyes. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like someone's son. I felt like a father. The storm came in heavy that night. Rain hammered the roof like it had something to prove, and the wind howled through the chimney, low and mournful, like the house itself was trying to remember how to breathe. Caleb had fallen asleep on the couch, curled up beneath his favorite blanket, the one with the little rocket ships and fading stitches. Leah was upstairs reading, her soft lamplight spilling beneath the bedroom door. And me? I was in the basement holding a box I hadn't opened in years. It was labeled Mom plus Dad. The handwriting was my mother's. Neat, round, a little too perfect, like she wanted even her letters to behave. I didn't remember packing it. Probably did it in a hurry, sometime after moving out. Before I realized you can't pack away pain neatly. It leaks, even through cardboard. I sat on the cold floor, flicked open the lid, and there they were. A lifetime in fragments, old photos, receipts, a broken snow globe from a family trip we never took again. The kind of memories that don't just haunt you. They trick you, make you think it wasn't all bad until you remember what came after the camera clicked. There was one picture I hadn't seen since I was 19. Christmas 1998. Aaron and I in matching sweaters, both holding plastic mugs of cocoa. Dad behind us, one hand on each of our shoulders. His smile was real, not the tight-lipped version he'd wear later when life had hardened around him. Mom stood beside him, half-turned, eyes on him instead of us. And there it was. The lie. Frozen. Beautiful. Almost enough to make me forget. I sat there for a long time, tracing the edges of that photo with my thumb. Then I reached for the small metal trash can near the workbench and set it beside me. The lighter was still in my jacket pocket. I'd used it earlier to fix one of Caleb's birthday candles that wouldn't stay lit. Funny how fire behaves differently depending on what you feed it. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to keep the picture, to say it mattered, that it was proof of something worth remembering. But the truth was, I didn't need proof anymore. Not of where I came from, not of who they were. I struck the lighter. The flame flared up, small but sure. When I held the edge of the photograph above it, the paper curled instantly, colors bleeding into black. The faces disappeared in silence. First Aaron, then Mom, then Dad, until only ash remained. Delicate, gray, and strangely light. I added more photos, birthday cards, my old report card with his red pen marks, A note from my mother. "We're proud of you, honey. Don't forget to send the check before the 15th. It all went up in quiet flame. When it was done, I stood there, watching the smoke swirl against the ceiling like ghosts finally finding the exit. Then I took a deep breath, the kind that feels like the first one after being underwater too long. It didn't feel like loss. It felt like space. I went upstairs, washed my hands, and stopped in the doorway to the living room. Caleb was still asleep, mouth slightly open, his toy fox clutched tight. The stormlight flickered across his face. I sat beside him, careful not to wake him. For a moment, I just watched him breathe. That steady rhythm kids have when they're too young to carry the world yet. I thought about the photo that was now just ash. And I realized, maybe this was what legacy really meant. Not the things you inherit, but the things you refuse to pass on. The wind outside calmed. I reached over, tucked the blanket tighter around him. He stirred slightly, mumbled something in his sleep. I caught only 2 words. "Home, Dad." Yeah, I thought. We're getting there. It was a Tuesday when Aaron showed up. The kind of gray morning that makes even the sky look tired. Leah had just left for work. Caleb was at school. The house was quiet. Too quiet. The kind that lets you hear every thought you've been trying to drown. The knock came soft at first, almost uncertain. 3 times. Then silence. I almost didn't answer. When I opened the door, Aaron was standing there in a soaked jacket, eyes rimmed red like he hadn't slept. He looked smaller somehow. Not just older, but smaller. Like the years had been carving at him piece by piece. "Hey," he said. His voice cracked on the word. I didn't say anything, just stepped aside. He hesitated before walking in, eyes darting around the living room like he was taking inventory of a life he didn't recognize. He paused on Caleb's drawings taped to the wall. Spaceships, trees, a crooked house with 3 stick figures holding hands. "You got a nice place," he murmured. I nodded. We stood there for a beat too long, the kind of silence that presses against your ribs. Finally, I said, "Coffee?" He nodded again, grateful for the small normalcy. In the kitchen, the air smelled faintly of last night's cocoa. He sat at the table, fidgeting with a coaster, eyes fixed on the grain of the wood like he could hide inside it. When I placed a mug in front of him, he wrapped his hands around it but didn't drink. He said, "I saw the photo you posted, the one at Christmas." I waited. His jaw flexed. "Mom lost it. Dad too. They say you made them look like monsters." I raised an eyebrow. They didn't need my help with that. Aaron let out a breath, a mix between a laugh and a sigh. "Yeah, I figured you'd say that." He rubbed his face with both hands, the tremor in his fingers barely hidden. "I'm not here to defend them, Ev," he said quietly. "I'm here because I should have said something that night." The words hung there. I leaned back against the counter. "Said what?" He looked up, and for a moment, I saw the boy he used to be. The one who'd share his Halloween candy with me, who used to sleep on the floor of my room during storms. He swallowed hard. It wasn't Mom who told Caleb not to sit. It was Dad. I froze. "What?" He nodded slowly. She started to set the plate. He stopped her, said, "He's not blood. He can wait." For a second, I couldn't breathe. The air turned heavy, the walls closing in. Aaron went on, voice breaking. I didn't say anything. I laughed, like it was a joke. I thought keeping quiet was keeping peace. But when you left, I saw Caleb's face. I can't get it out of my head. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a small envelope, and pushed it across the table. Inside was a check. "What's this?" I asked. "My share," he said. "For Dad's bills, for everything." I told him I'm done. Told them both. I stared at the paper, then back at him. He gave a half smile, Guess it took your kid to remind me what family's supposed to look like. We sat there for a long time, the only sound the ticking clock on the wall. Outside, rain began again, tapping softly against the window. Finally, Aaron spoke. "He called you this morning, didn't he?" I nodded. "Yeah, said he wanted to talk things out." Aaron looked down. "Don't go." I studied him. "Why?" He hesitated, then whispered, "He's not well, not just sick, angry. He said he's coming here if you don't pick up." Something cold settled in my stomach. By evening, I double-checked the locks. Leah noticed but didn't ask. Caleb was in his room, humming to himself, building another Lego world where everything fit together perfectly. The phone rang again around 9. Dad's number. I let it ring. Then the voicemail pinged. His voice, low and sharp. "You think you can embarrass me? You think walking away makes you better? I'll remind you who you are." I deleted it, but the sound stayed. Later that night, I found Aaron sitting in his truck outside, headlights off, hands gripping the steering wheel. "I'll stay close," he said, "just in case." I wanted to tell him not to, that it wasn't his burden anymore. But instead, I just nodded, because deep down, I knew he was right. The story wasn't over. Not yet.